Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Rimo3's brand new partner series. I am CTO Samit Halvadia, and with me today, I have a very dear friend and special partner, Kevin Nardone, who is a senior enterprise architect at Citrix. So, Kevin, thank you for joining and being part of this monumental, historic event.
Samir, thanks. It's always good to catch up. It's been I think you and I have known each other for 10 years at this point in time. So mentor, friend, always glad to chat with you.
Really appreciate that. And it's funny because you and I have been texting back and forth and having a couple of FaceTime sessions. And one of the things we talked about is, you know, remote work styles have always been a big part of the Citrix vision, being able to be productive and still live your life, whether it's picking up your kids from school because you have reliable access to your applications, your data, and your workspaces. And you and I have lived this for ages, but now with the work from home force going up by 500%, Citrix has had a really interesting year where like the messaging has really resonated and adoption has really taken off out of necessity. So what have you seen over the last year as it pertains to the experience at Citrix?
Thanks, Samit. And first off, any opinions expressed are of my own versus Citrix. But one of the things that I'm very thankful of is, especially as a senior enterprise architect, is really being on the forefront when it comes to helping customers address this challenge when it comes to adopting to remote work or expanded capacity within the data center. I feel like from the events of last year and kind of really getting into remote work was building, it was growing. Some of the leaders were kind of jumping into it early, and I feel it really pressed the issue for some organizations. So like kind of understanding, okay, we now have all of these people working on the edge. How do we secure it? How do we, bring in their information and their resources into our data center, giving them a virtual desktop, a virtual application, a workspace, in a way that, they might not be used to, but they get the benefit as an employee, as a user, they get the benefits of, working at home, being with their family, having more flexibility, saving commute time, while the business, gets to focus on security, better productivity. So I think the security challenge as well as the capacity challenge of doing remote work is fairly new for a lot of organizations, but using technologies like Azure, Citrix Cloud, Rimo3, it's really kind of very helpful to kind of get them to where they need to be.
And like when you think about that, right? Capacity is an interesting concept that you can scale up, you can scale down as needed. You don't have to invest in the capital expenditure of a retail commercial space, HVAC, all that cool stuff. But the reality is, with any digital transformation, regardless of the benefit that comes as an outcome of that digital transformation, there's some challenges that are associated with getting there, that journey. And it's typically an ongoing journey. What have you seen as being some of those challenges as it pertains to the journey to the cloud?
So one of the big things, especially with public cloud, that I always encourage customers, partners to do is kind of really take the concept of a data center and let's rethink it. Let's try to, like, any assumptions or like current state challenges, like let's try to go in and think from like a fresh set of requirements. Because when you go from on your data center to public cloud, cost management, some of the capabilities that you have, like app development tools, you're gonna have like a foray of innovation capabilities that you didn't have before. So it always helps to think differently. And then that's also like thinking of like a speed of innovation, especially if a lot of businesses didn't have the chance to really kind of pause and think, focusing on, use cases that, hey, we can potentially get this up and running quickly. We know that there's not a lot of dependencies within the data center. So like other than like data center planning and like looking at your overall set of tools, a lot of organizations have really looked into persona, like who is my end user, how are they working, what do they need? Because when you get to public cloud, especially from your data center, there might be a disassociation of that close proximity. One of the things with Citrix, for example, it's the data that you have for an application, the data that you have for like a user's profile, like having that close proximity is critical to performance. So like getting apps to the cloud also becomes pretty critical as well.
Now, when you talk about getting apps to the cloud, I think it's an interesting concept because you have a variety of different applications. You talked about defining user personas, and everyone's now working remotely. They're going to access their applications and their user data in very different ways than they historically have. And from your perspective, selfishly, thinking about Rimo3, the idea for us is really around understanding what the user needs to do in order to get access to their applications and provide a great user experience. Are you starting to see the demand for understanding application assessments, understanding user density, understanding how to define user persona? Are these part of that kind of roadmap to the cloud?
So I think the demand for understanding that's really always been there too, and especially when you and I had a chance to work together at AppDNA, and just the concept of getting off of like Windows XP to Windows 7 being really
Yeah.
prevalent. Organizations looking at 2008 R2 getting to 2012 or 2016 from a server context. Now, one of the interesting things about cloud, and especially when it comes to like maximizing public cloud capabilities, is you get into the concepts of lifting and shifting app backends and app data. So am I going to rehost an application, refactor it, or re-architect it? Microsoft does a really great job, especially within like the cloud adoption framework, of like setting up parameters, like hey, how you can characterize your applications. Definitely a reference I recommend anyone listening to this check out as well. Within the ready section, it kind of gives you what does each application type look like, and really assessing your digital estate for that move. And like understanding that move as well, and that digital estate is also essential for Citrix success, especially being the mechanism to deliver a desktop, an app, a workspace to an end user, making sure all of their resources are collected, associated, and set up in a way to perform well. So hey, if I have an app backend that can't leave to Azure yet, we can't rehost it, let's run it in the data center using Citrix Cloud, and then also then present someone their desktop within Azure, and then use the ability of Citrix to deliver that app virtually to that desktop in Azure. So being able to kind of like segment and go through that characterization is really important. Honestly, something I recommend people do prior to the start of any project.
And that assessment piece really is quite important, Kevin. And you're right. Even in our AppDNA days, when we thought about it, it was really kind of a linear migration, right? In the sense that you're moving from 32-bit Windows XP to 64 or 32-bit Windows 7, typically being delivered the same way. Now what we've seen with the remote workforce is you have a myriad of different application delivery models, right? Some of it will be a personal VDI, some of it will be pooled, some of it will be completely cloud hosted, some of it will be traditional server-based compute. Regardless of how that's being delivered, what we've started seeing, especially in some of our joint opportunities, Kevin, is that we've started seeing the application assessment is not so much about compatibility anymore. It's really about understanding the overall application experience. So it's not about saying, hey, I just want to know if this application is going to work on my desired workspace. It's really about understanding, okay, test it against all 12 of my delivery models. Understand the data around functionality, performance, and costing, and make an informed decision and deploy with that sense of confidence to figure out, okay, am I getting the right application in the right format to the right user on the right platform for a great user experience? And that's where I've started seeing kind of our synergies really align closely to say, let's help them actually create an informed application delivery model as opposed to just traditional automated testing. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think you hit a lot of really critical points as well, especially when it comes to, hey, starting fresh, like let's innovate, let's kind of go into the cloud with a fresh set of eyes and understand where we are today from an application estate, data estate, et cetera. Once you make that shift, it doesn't change. Like exactly like you mentioned, apps are going to change, requirements for performance are going to change. So like setting up a cadence where it's built into your process to like understand the performance impact of an application change. Hey, maybe our users, we set them up with this type of instance type, and that's use the resource utilization data we get from Citrix to understand how much CPU memory they're actually using, and let's go about and right size it so that way we can make costs more efficient. So like building in that continuous innovation process into your like ongoing operations through automated testing, or through just having the conversation and say, hey, what's changed in the last 3 months of innovation within Azure, within Citrix Cloud? Like how should we pivot? How should we pivot to make our infrastructure more effective and more efficient, and or make our user experience better?
It's a good point because you touched on ongoing management, and I like to think of this as an overall journey, right? You start with the planning and assessment, then you actually do the lift of migration. But post migration, you're talking about leveraging analytics and tooling that already exists to start not just effectively managing the application and user data, but really optimizing it, right? From a cost perspective, from an application experience perspective. And I think that when we start thinking about the overarching kind of goal of what Citrix and Rimo3 can do together, I'd put it into a simple format, which is help us move application workloads to your desired workspaces, and let Citrix help you manage and optimize them post deployment. What do you think around what that joint value proposition looks like from your perspective?
I mean, the thing is, like, people aren't adopting the technology if you can't get the apps to work. So, like,
Yeah.
same, like, when it comes to like understanding and performing, like, users, they need to be able to get their job done. They need to have, the space to succeed when it comes to going in and being able to use what they do to use what they need to be productive. So thinking of like getting apps effectively, especially using some of the automated capabilities of Rimo3. And like originally, when we originally looked back at App DNA on the Citrix side, is people need their apps. And I want to be able to effectively manage my apps, like applications within a Citrix environment. When it comes to automated testing, accommodating change, accommodating differences in performance, or even understanding, what application is going to be a bottleneck when it comes to my overall performance, is all very critical, because that gives you having that data gives you the ability to make decisions to improve performance and improve user experience. And user experience is really what's going to help people adopt and really make an impact when it comes to technology in your business.
I agree, Kevin. So listen, I do appreciate you taking the time today and
Of course.
sitting down with us and talking a little bit about this. I'm really looking forward to the continued joint partnership between Rimo3 and Citrix. And any parting thoughts?
No, it's always good to catch up, and I think it's always funny, like kind of thinking back and just applications. That's the bread and butter, right? Like just thinking about like your phone, and just one of the great things Apple did was it just gave you better insight into an app. Like, hey, I want to go book a flight or check the web. It's really, and that's enterprise technology is very similar, and that's kind of one of the things that I love about what Citrix is doing is taking the approach of and addressing the consumerization of IT. Because like getting to your application, like I want to do this task and it's so critical. So I'm really looking forward to kind of how the industry continues to change, continues to innovate. Because I do feel like the pace of innovation has become much more rapid in the last year, and really looking forward to seeing what comes, especially as a technologist.
Sounds great. Well, I appreciate the time, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
All right. Take it easy, bud.